of Job. We are going to begin in the book of Job, but we are not going to end in the book of Job. So the book of Job is just going to be our starting point, and we are going to move into other books as well to try and buttress the point that we want to hammer home this morning. I've put up that picture on the board where I have Satan or the devil on one side, and I have God on the other side. And naturally, I have a human being who is in the middle, who is in the center of God and Satan. In fact, one man one time used an example of a human being being the voter, and he was using God and Satan as the opposing forces that need your vote. So you are actually going into an election. That is what this man was saying. And when you are going into an election, we are going to be going into our own elections next year. And basically, we have two horses that are going to be pitted on one side. So you have one horse on the other side, and you have the other horse on the other side. And there is you and me, the voter, in between. And we are going to be going to the polling stations to cast our vote, to put our eggs on one horse that we think we want to ride and run with. So the point that he was making was you have God on one side and you have the devil on Satan on the other side. And there is you, and you are holding on to your eggs. And it's you who is going to decide who you are going to give this eggs to. Are you going to give the eggs to God, or you are going to deposit your eggs in the ballot box that favors Satan? We will think about that, and we'll probably make reference to it again as we are proceeding with our day's business. I want to talk this morning about temptations. Let me not say temptations really. Let me talk about inflictions. Let me talk about troubles. Let me talk about problems that bedevil each and every one of us at each and every moment. I don't know what problems you are facing right now in life. Neither do you know all the problems that I could be going through in life right now. It could be a health problem. We don't always know each other's health issues anyway. We only tend to know about somebody's health issues mostly when they really are ballooning out of control. But most of the time we have people that are struggling in one because of illness and sicknesses that have not yet been disclosed. You could be having one, I could be having one, I don't know. You could be having a financial problem at home that might have been going for a long time, or that you've just started and you don't know for how long that is going to go. I could be going through the same dry spell as well. We don't know. You could be going through a revolt in your family. Maybe your own family members are rejecting you. Maybe there's disharmony in the family unit. It could be your own children. It could be your extended family, your brothers, your sisters. Again, I don't know. The same way you would not know if I'm going through such a problem unless if I've disclosed it to you. There are several problems that we can actually face in life. But this is the question. If we are facing such a problem, what do we elect to do? If we are facing such a problem and we are going through such a dry patch, such a gray patch in our lives, what is our decision? How do we respond? And how do we react to that problem? So I'm going to suggest to you a couple of names from the Bible this morning that we are going to start from. Some of the men who went through some of the problems that you can never think of, and we want to see how they reacted in those problems. But there's one thing that I want to assure you before we can move into any men that we are going to look at. That while you are going through such problems as a human being, God is still there, and there is a reaction and a response that God is going to give. Satan is also there, and there is a response and a reaction that he also is going to give. Now, everything is centered on you, on how you are going to finally manage your problem. How you are going to finally maneuver this infliction that is being inflicted in your life. It's actually interesting that almost every time when we have had a bad omen in life. Either you've just been involved in a road accident, or somebody has come into your house and they have robbed you, or they've even shot you and you are injured. We have always tended to say, God has forsaken us, or people are actually going to say, Satan is actually trying me. There are so many statements that we actually say to that effect, which we really don't have proof about. I believe there are times that we actually lie about Satan. There are times that we actually falsely accuse him when he has not done anything. In fact, the book of James talks about temptations. We will talk about that the other day. And James tells us how somebody falls into temptation. We are not talking about James today. We probably are going to make a reference to the 5th chapter of James later, not connected to temptations. I want us to go, as I have already suggested, to the book of Job. We have a story. On one side, this is a beautiful story. But on another side, this is a very sorrowful story of this man that was called Job. In the story of Job is where you will see and you will start questioning and asking God, but God, where were you? How can you allow a man like Job, a man righteous as him, to actually fall into troubles and problems that he fell into? How can you allow your righteous people to live the way that Job lived? But I want us to be focusing on this man that is called Job. As we move into the first chapter of the book of Job, we are going to read a few verses, and then we'll move into the second chapter, and we will also read a few verses in the second chapter. And I want us to make some applications about this man that is called Job. Verse 1 of the book of Job says there was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. If we were not going to be told anything else about Job, after having just been told this one statement, which is contained in verse 1, I think we would still be able to tell the story about Job without any other information, only that information contained in one verse. That would actually give us a head start when we want to talk about this man called Job. So Job was blameless, Job was righteous, Job was upright, Job feared God. So you would expect life to be normal, you would expect life to flow for him, because we actually have amongst ourselves in the world today people who actually teach you that when you believe in God and you are the child of God, there is no temptation that can befall you. There is no problem that can befall you. In fact, they actually make a suggestion that if you find yourself in trouble or in problems, then you are not worshiping and you are not praying to God from deep down your heart. We have a man that is called Job, and this man was blameless. This man was upright. This man feared God, and this man turned away from evil. 4 good qualities that we find in Job. If we had them, then we would also be proud. But listen to what is going to happen to Job. After we have been told from verse 2 that he was so rich and he had almost everything that he wanted in life, including 10 children, 7 sons, and 3 daughters. Verse 6 tells us, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, from where have you come? Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and from on the earth, and from walking up and down on it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth? So even God knew about this man called Job, and he was even proud to call him his good creature. And he's even saying to Satan, boasting to Satan, have you considered him? Do you know what he is like? Then, verse 9, Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear you, God, for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. And we are going to see a roller coaster in Job's life from verse 13. Now there was a day when his sons, now we are going to be told about everything that ever happened to Job's life in verse 14. We are going to be told about the destruction of his oxen and his donkeys. In verse 16, we are going to be told about the destruction of his sheep. In verse 17, we are also going to be told about the destruction of his camels. And lastly, in verse 18, we are going to be seeing the destruction of his prized possessions, his children. They are all going to die in one day. That's recorded in verse 18. But listen to the reaction that Job is going to give. In verse 20, then Job arose, and he tore his robe, and he shaved his head, and he fell on the ground, and he worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. You would assume that Job was an abnormal person. I mean, under normal circumstances, he should have actually uttered his statement and say, God has forsaken me. Instead, Job is actually doing the opposite. The opposite, that is even going to instigate Satan when he goes back to God. And Satan is going to say to God, the reason why Job has not yet forsaken you is because you have touched everything else that was around him. You have not touched his flesh. Bone for bone, flesh for flesh. And God is going to say to the devil, go and do exactly that. That's the story we are going to read in the second chapter of the book of Job. But still, listen, from verse 9, then his wife said to him, this is after he has been inflicted with the wounds. And Job, from verse 7, he tells us, so Satan went out from the presence of the Lord, and he struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Even when his friends came and they started heaping accusations on him, still Job did not sin against God. It's actually interesting if you turn with me, while we are still in the book of Job, to chapter 19, there is something that we are going to see, an unusual behavior by this man that was called Job. He has lost everything. Now he has lost. The devil thought, if Job loses his health, he is going to forsake me. But still, Job did not forsake him. He is acting very, very unusual. And in chapter 19, after his three friends have come, and all along they have been heaping accusations on him, because to them, they believed that Job must have done something. Surely, you cannot be punished the way you are being punished unless something has been done wrongly by you. They thought he was on the wrong side of the wrong side of God. Job has been trying to justify himself, but still they are heaping accusations after accusations on him. In chapter 19, then Job answered and said, verse 1, how long will you torment me and break me in pieces with words? These 10 times you have cast reproach upon me. Are you not ashamed to wrong me? And even if it be true that I have erred, my error remains with myself. If indeed you magnify yourselves against me and make my disgrace an argument against me, know then that God has put me in the wrong and closed his net about me. Behold, I cry out violence, but I am not ashamed. I call for help, but there is no justice. He has walled up my way so that I cannot pass. And he has set darkness upon my paths. He has stripped from me my glory and taken the crown from my head. He breaks me down on every side, and I am gone, and my hope has he pulled up like a tree. He has kindled his wrath against me, and counts me as his adversary. His troops come on together. They have cast up their siege ramp against me, and they have encamped around my tent. He has put my brothers far from me, and those who knew me are wholly estranged from me. My relatives you have failed me. My close friends, you have forgotten me. The guests in my house and my maidservants count me as a stranger. I have become a foreigner in their eyes. I call to my servant, but he gives me no answer. I must plead with him with my mouth for mercy. My breath is strange even to my wife, and I am a stench to the children of my own mother. Even young children, they despise me. When I rise, they talk against me. All my intimate friends abhor me, and those who I love have turned against me. My bones stick to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. Have mercy on me, have mercy on me, all you my friends. For the hand of God has touched me. Why do you like God? Pursue me. Why are you not satisfied with my flesh? But listen to what he says from verse 23. All that my words were written, all that they were inscribed in a book, all that with an iron pen and lid, they were engraved in the rock forever. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth. I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the end he shall prevail. This is what Job is saying. After all the calamities that have befallen him, he still is standing. Even his wife has come, the one who is supposed to be very close to him, his better half has come and says, you should curse God so that you die. Job is saying, I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the end he shall prevail. We are talking about a man that is reeling under pressure. Pressure from different angles, pressure from all the sides of his life. Job is still standing because God is watching, Satan is watching. What Satan wanted from Job was for him to forsake God and curse him so that he can be his friend. Job is going to say, I know my Redeemer lives. And he still is going to turn his attention to God. And he is going to turn his back to the devil. Think about other men that we can talk about in the Bible. Before the story of Job, we know the story of a man that is called Joseph. We looked at Joseph this morning as one of the sons of Jacob. Joseph, at the age of 17, that should be a tender age by all standards. This man is actually going to be sold by his brothers into Egypt. In the 37th chapter of the book of Genesis, we are actually going to see him dreaming some dreams, and his brothers are going to hate him. They are going to sell him to some Ishmaelites who were nomads that were going to go down into Egypt. When we get to the 39th chapter of the book of Genesis, we meet Joseph now in Egypt. And this young man has been sold to Potiphar, who was one of the leading lights in Egypt at the time. So he has been sold to Potiphar, and we are seeing this Joseph, who was so lovely, a young man that feared God. We find him at the mercy of Potiphar's wife. So when we read the story in the 39th chapter of the book of Genesis, we actually see how he was going to be tormented by Potiphar's wife. So when Potiphar's wife suggested that Joseph was supposed to sleep with him, I like Joseph's response beginning from verse 8 of chapter 39. In chapter 8, Joseph says to Potiphar's wife, everything else in this house was given to me. I'm actually in charge, including to the food that Potiphar eats. I'm in charge of everything. There is only one thing that he withheld from me, and that is you. Why? Because you are his wife. But listen to what Joseph is going to say in the following statement in verse 9. After having said, you are his wife, in verse 9 he is going to say, so how can I commit this wickedness against God? How can I sin against God? Because the very moment that Joseph is standing here, if he had fallen under pressure to Potiphar's wife's demand, he would have fallen to Satan. He would have given his ex to the devil instead of giving his vote to God. Joseph is saying, I will stand by God. I'm not going to stand by the devil. Joseph was not stupid. He knew the result. He knew the consequences. He is going to end up in jail. For at least 2 years he's going to be jailed for a crime that he had not committed. The young Joseph is going to stand by God. Under tremendous pressure, he is saying, I'm not going to give in. I'm going to stand with God. To hell Satan, and I'll be with God. If you think about another man, if we go to the book of Daniel, There are stories that we hear there, two stories that I want to talk about. One that is recorded in the 3rd chapter of the book of Daniel. We see the 3 friends of Daniel, popularly known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And of course, we know that those were not the names they were given by their mothers. Meshach was actually called Mishael, Abednego was called Azariah, and Shadrach was called Hananiah. Those were the names they had been given by their mothers. We read about these 3 young men who are in Babylon. They have been taken by Nebuchadnezzar and they are living in a foreign land in Babylon. So a statue is going to be made by the Babylonian authorities, and everybody is going to be ordered that you are supposed to worship that statue. These people knew that Israelites, including these 3 young men and their friend Daniel, they would never bow down to it. They would never bow down to a god. They would bow down to God. So they are going to make this statue, and they are going to put it there, and they are going to say, everybody, and a law was made, you are supposed to worship it. They are going to say, we are not going to do that. And they knew the consequences. They are going to be taken, and they are going to be thrown into the deep end of the fiery furnace. Listen to what is going to happen. Turn with me to the book of Daniel. Quickly turn with me to the book of Daniel. If we are there, I want us to rest in chapter 3. If you are in the book of Daniel, I want you to rest in the book of Daniel chapter 3. After they have been thrown into the fiery furnace, the next morning, King Nebuchadnezzar, the very moment he's going to order the furnace that it can be heated 7 times. So if it on normal days it would run at 1,000 degrees Celsius, this time it has to run at 7,000 degrees Celsius, simply because it has to melt quickly, these 3 youngsters. But that does not happen. They are going to be thrown in there bound. Verse 24, the next morning, then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? They answered and said to the king, true, O king. He answered and said, but I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Why? We threw 3 men, but if I look, I'm seeing 4 men. We are going to make reference to this a little bit later. For now, I just want you to have this in mind. We have 3 young men who are being punished for loving God, who are being punished the same way Job was punished, the same way Joseph was punished, because they did not want to give their vote to Satan, they wanted to give their vote to God. Instead, they are going to go through troubles for having made that choice, which should have freed them from any wrongdoing, but we actually find them, they are actually living miserably. Think about Daniel himself in the 6th chapter of the book of Daniel. Daniel also, he is going to refuse to worship a god, and he elected to worship God. He is going to be punished for doing that. We read that story, we are not going to read about it, but we read about it in the 6th chapter. In paraphrasing the story, we know that Daniel is going to be taken and is going to be thrown into the den of lions. But I like what is going to happen at the end. Because the next day when the king again comes back and he wants to see whether Daniel has been eaten, he actually is going to ask Daniel from the door, and he says, Daniel, the God, your God, yes, he served you. Daniel actually answered him and said to him, God actually sent his angel, and the angel came in and it shut the mouths of the lions. And I am unbroken. I am as Daniel, the same Daniel that he knew, the same Daniel that he threw in. Why was Daniel thrown into the lion's den? Because he worshipped God. Think about some New Testament characters. If we turn our Bibles and turn our attention to the book of Acts, in the 12th chapter, the 12th chapter opens by telling us about the death of one of the apostles of Jesus. And this man was called James, who was the brother of John. He is actually killed by Herod Agrippa. And when Herod Agrippa has killed James, that really excites the Jews. And when the Jews have seen this, He also is going to be excited. That is Herod Agrippa. He is going to grab Peter and he's going to throw him into jail. So that after the Passover, he is going to take him out and he's also going to execute him. The same way he has executed James. Of course, we know the story of the angel that is actually going to come and rescue Peter. You will read that story in the book of Acts chapter 12, beginning from verse 1. You are going to find out more facts that I'm not going to tell you now. But I just want you, at this particular time, to think about Peter and James. James has already lost his life. Why? Because he is an apostle of Jesus, who worships God. Why is Peter being arrested in preparation for his death? Simply because he worships God. But all these men, under normal circumstances, if it was me, if this is me, this is Peter, that has been thrown in jail, before I can be killed, I could have gone and sought an audience with the king and say to the king, okay, king, you don't want me to worship God. I am renouncing God in front of you. Please let me free. Peter is not going to do that. Peter is not going to give up to pressure. Rather, he would rather die because he knows no other name except the name of God. In fact, that's exactly what he says. Can't remember in Acts chapter 3 or in Acts chapter 4 when he's in John after they have been arrested. He actually is going to declare and say, we are not going to stop preaching this name because there is no other name that we know which is going to bring salvation. He is going to stand by God under all the tremendous pressure that is going to be applied on him. He still is not going to reject God. He is not going to curse God. He is going to remain with God. Think about Paul. And I want us to think about this man as we turn our Bibles to the book of 2 Corinthians, where we are actually going to sum up our discussion this morning. Turn with me to the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 12. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. The first 10 verses of 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul is actually going to mention two things that have happened to him. One is a vision that he has seen about Jesus. But I don't want to talk about the vision. I want us to jump as far down to verse 7, where we are going to see the other thing that Paul is actually going to mention. Paul in verse 7 is going to say, so to keep me from being too elated. King James Version says, to keep me from being exalted above measure. The ESV one I'm reading from says, so to keep me from being too elated. By the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in my flesh, a message of Satan to harass me, to keep me from being too elated. And let's stop there and think about this. One thing that Paul is confirming to us is that there is something that is uncomfortable which is happening in his life. He is actually alluding to the fact that the message of Satan, whatever it was, is actually put into his flesh. That is going to harass him. We don't know what this problem was. We have heard so many speculations which we are not really worried about. We have heard suggestions that Paul was actually talking about his poor eyesight. We don't have biblical proof to that. We have heard so many people that actually try to suggest this or suggest that. Let us not worry about that. Let us worry about that Paul is having a problem here. Whatever that problem was, we don't know. But Paul says, this is a message of Satan which is harassing me. Paul is being harassed by something in his body. But listen to his reaction from verse 8. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. This would have been a normal reaction anyway, by everybody. I believe everybody will do that. In fact, this reminds me of the story in Numbers chapter 21. The children of Israel are in the wilderness. And God has actually put snakes that are actually, serpents that are biting them and they are dying en masse. They are going to go to Moses and say, Moses, we have sinned to God. But we are repenting. Please, can you go to God and entreat him to take away the snakes out of us? Moses went to God and he prayed. And God said, I'm not going to take away the snakes. He didn't say that statement, but that's basically what he did. In fact, he said to Moses, can you make another serpent, which is a bronze serpent, put it up there in a peculiar place? Whoever is going to be bitten by a serpent and he looks at that bronze serpent, he is going to be saved. The natural reaction which they were looking for, the children of Israel, was that God takes the snakes away. That should be the natural reaction by anybody of us. If I am having a problem, my prayer is, God, please take it away. Paul is also living just like a natural human being. Please, God, can you take this problem away? But God is going to respond to him, and he says, my grace is sufficient. That's in verse 9. But he said to him, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then I am condemned with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I think this does it for whatever we have been talking about. All the men that we have mentioned so far, this is exactly what they had in mind. That when you are weak in flesh, because of inflictions, because of problems, actually God is strong during that particular time. This has always been the tradition anyway, that we look for God when we are in trouble. So many times the time that we want to get very, very close to God is when we are having a problem. And we are actually acknowledging that we have no one else who can assist us except you, God. It's said that so many times Christians are actually going to find themselves in the wrong side. When they are deep down in problems, they actually look for solutions elsewhere. We don't always tend to God and look for solutions like what these men were doing. I know a king of Israel. One of them, I think, is recorded in the book of 2 Kings chapter 1. This man who was called Ahaziah. This man, when he had a problem, he fell and he broke his leg or whatever. Instead of him going to God and ask for help, the man turned to some god and he actually wanted help. God is going to send one of his prophets, Elijah, and he says, meet his messengers as they are coming to consult. Ask them this question: is there no God in Israel that you are going to turn to a God to consult about me? Why didn't you come to me to consult about your problem? We are in different phases of different problems in our lives. What is our reaction and what is our response when we find ourselves entangled in a certain problem? We have beautiful examples of the men that we have just mentioned now, who were found, especially Job, in a problem that not a single one of them could have handled. Yet Job still remained faithful to God, not faithful to a God. What problem are you going through? I don't know. You don't know the problem that I am going through. But I want to leave you with this message. When Paul is going to God and he said, please God, take away the problem, God is going to say, I am not going to take away the problem because my grace is sufficient for you. In fact, you are going to be strong if you have problems. You are going to be weak if you don't have problems. And this is a life principle anyway. It's very true. You have to be tested to the last for people to see. All children, when they go to school, after a while, they are actually going to be tested by a public examination. The reason is to test them and see if they have grasped what they have been learning. If you are not going to be tested, nobody's ever going to know whether you grasped whatever you have been learning. If we are not going to be tested in life, we are never going to be seen whether we are aligning with God or we are aligning with the devil. The temptations are going to be there, problems are going to be there, but they should actually make us strong. We should actually emerge from the problems stronger than we were before. Paul actually acknowledged that fact here in verse 10 in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 where we were. He says, for the sake of Christ, then I am condemned. I am happy to be living with weaknesses. I am happy to be living with insults. I am happy to be living with hardships. I am happy to be living with persecutions. I am happy to be living with calamities. For when I am weak, I am actually strong. When I am weak fleshly, spiritually I am actually strong because I am close to God. I know that it's only God who is going to deliver me. In fact, I didn't realize the song that we sang, 589, I was caught because I knew I was going to talk about this. There is a sentence that actually caught me there in 589 of the song, I Want to Be a Worker. It caught my eye, and this is the last statement of the last stanza. stanza number 3. You are not there in your books. Stanza number 3 says, I want to be a worker, strong and brave. But listen to what the author says the next. He says, I want to trust in Jesus' power to save. And this is exactly what we should all do, to trust in Jesus' power to save us from whatever problem we have. Problems should not break us down, but problems should actually bring us closer to God, so that when we are weak, we actually are going to be strong. What is going to be my reaction when I find myself in trouble? I want to leave you with the example of these two. This example has been used probably over and over, and you probably might have heard about it. It's an example of a carrot. We know a carrot, fresh carrot from a garden, and we know an egg. If you take a fresh carrot from a garden and you throw it down on a hard surface, it's not going to feel anything. Nothing is going to happen to it. When you want to eat it, you really have to summon all your power, because it's going to be resisting your teeth. Sharp as they are, it's going to be resisting because it's strong. But if you take an egg on one side and you throw it down on a hard surface, you're not going to find anything. It's going to break. It's fragile. But take the two things and try them. Put temptations to them, put problems, put inflictions to them. Take the two products and you put them in a boiling water and give them some 10, 15 minutes. Go back to them and take them out of the boiling water. Take an egg and throw it on a hard surface. Now it's hard. But take a carrot. Now you can easily chop it off because it becomes weak. It becomes soft. When you exert pressure on it, it becomes soft. When you exert pressure on an egg, it becomes hard. When pressure is exerted on you, do you become soft and you align with Satan? When pressure is exerted on you, do you become stronger and you even come to God? Because God is never going to change. And his message is still going to remain the message that my grace is sufficient for you, in problem or out of problem. I want you to realize one thing. In all the situations that we talked about, particularly the situation of Peter when he is in jail, particularly the situation of Daniel's 3 friends, particularly the situation with Daniel himself, we actually see the Bible telling us that these men were not alone in the problem. In fact, God went in the problem with them. He could have stopped them from going into problem. He can stop you from going into problem, but he would allow us to go into problem. But one thing that we should be sure about is that God is with us in that problem. His angels are going to be guiding us in that problem. The thing is, how are we going to react so that we are going to derive maximum benefit from God's grace? I hope and trust that we are going to be provoked by these men, and we are going to be encouraged by their courage. We are going to be encouraged by their responses to various problems they were exerted, the various problems that were exerted on them, and we still find them coming out tops. I believe and I'm sure that we can also come out tops if we still remember that the grace of God is always sufficient for us. Thank you very much.